Lucas returns to his hometown after decades, searching for answers in the memories of his first love. But when he discovers that a young man with an uncanny resemblance could change his life forever, he is faced with a truth he never imagined. The fresh morning air carried a familiar whisper as Lucas walked through the cobblestone streets of his hometown. After decades living far away, returning to that corner full of memories was like opening an old photo album, where every corner seemed to tell a story lost in time. The worn facades of the buildings remained the same, although the passing of the years had given them a melancholic character. His steps led him, almost instinctively, to a small cafe in the central square. That place, with its faded green awning and outdoor wooden tables, had been a refuge for his youth. It was there that he used to meet Anna, his first love. Lucas couldn't help but smile as he remembered the afternoons they spent together, talking about dreams and futures that, in the end, never came to fruition. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee escaping through the door of the place brought him a warm feeling, but also a slight touch of bitterness. He stopped in front of the cafe and looked around for a moment. Life had changed so much since he was last there, but this place seemed to resist time. The tables were occupied by people enjoying the quiet of the morning, oblivious to the storm of emotions Lucas was experiencing. He took a deep breath and ventured through the door, with a mix of curiosity and nostalgia. The interior of the cafe was adorned with old photographs of the city, images that Lucas had seen 1,000 times before, but now seemed new. He scanned the place with his eyes as if searching for something more than the cafe. He was looking for a connection to his past. He sat at a table by the window, from where he could look out over the square and its tall trees that cast shadows on the ground. As he waited for the waiter to bring his order, his mind filled with memories. He thought of Anna, of how her laughter brightened even the grayest of days. They had been inseparable, at least until circumstances pushed them in opposite directions. Lucas had pursued his ambitions in the big city, leaving behind not only his home, but Anna as well. He had always believed that taking distance was the right thing to do, but now, sitting in that cafe, he wondered if it had been a wise decision. The waiter interrupted his thoughts by placing a steaming cup of coffee on the table. Lucas took a sip and closed his eyes, letting the taste bring him a sense of calm. However, that peace was momentary. Every corner of that place seemed to whisper stories he had tried to forget. He wondered how Anna was doing, what had become of her. Had she found the happiness he himself had never managed to achieve? Nostalgia was mixed with a slight uneasiness. Lucas knew that returning was not only a visit to the past, but also a confrontation with the decisions that shaped his life. As he left the cafe, his gaze fell once more on the square. The sun was shining, but it translated from Spanish to English. www.onlinedoctrinslator.com. A cloud of uncertainty followed him, reminding him that sometimes the past doesn't stay behind, but rather waits for the right moment to meet you again. Lucas pushed open the door of the cafe the next day, determined to confront the echoes of the past that still resonated in his mind. There was something about the place that drew him in, as if he were hoping to discover a missing piece of his life. As he made his way to his usual table by the window, a familiar glint caught his eye. There in a corner of the cafe, sitting elegantly and calmly, was Anna. Her hair, now flecked with silver strands, fell softly over her shoulders. Although the years had left their mark, her gaze retained the same intensity that Lucas remembered. For a moment, he felt the air leave his lungs. His heart was beating hard and doubts assailed him. Should he come closer? Would he be welcomed, or would his appearance reopen old wounds? He took a deep breath, adjusted his jacket, and walked toward the table with cautious steps. Anna looked up when she noticed him, and their eyes met. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Lucas gave a shy smile as he slightly bowed his head in greeting. "Lucas?" she asked, surprised but with a warm tone that reassured him. "Anna," he replied, his voice slightly trembling. "I didn't expect to see you here." Anna gestured for him to sit down. Lucas accepted, trying to calm his nerves. For a moment, they both looked at each other in silence, assessing the differences that time had left on their faces, but also recognizing traces of the past that remained intact. "How long has it been?" Anna finally asked, breaking the silence. "Too much," Lucas admitted, lacing his fingers on the table. But it seems like this place hasn't changed at all. Anna laughed softly, that sound he had missed more than he was willing to admit. The coffee is still the same, but we are not, she said with a hint of melancholy in her voice. The conversation flowed slowly at first, like two strangers trying to recover a forgotten language. They talked about their shared memories, afternoons in the square, endless walks through the city streets, dreams they had built together. Each word brought with it a mix of nostalgia and sadness. Lucas noticed a sparkle in Anna's eyes, a reflection of the feelings they both seemed to be reliving. "And how has your life been?" Anna asked, leaning slightly towards him. Lucas sighed, weighing his answer. Talking about his professional achievements and the life he had built outside his hometown seemed irrelevant at the moment. The only thing what mattered was the present. That unexpected opportunity to reconnect with someone who had meant so much to him. "I've been okay, I guess. But some things can't be replaced," he said, looking directly at Anna. Anna nodded, as if she understood perfectly what he meant, but she didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked away towards the window, watching the people come and go in the square. There was something in her expression that Lucas couldn't decipher, a mixture of calm and mystery. Suddenly, Anna changed the subject, asking him about his family, his experiences, his return to the city. Lucas, although grateful for the opportunity to talk, noticed that she carefully avoided mentioning certain aspects of her own life. There was something she wasn't saying, something she seemed to keep hidden. However, he decided not to press. For now, just being there, in front of her, was enough. As the conversation continued, Lucas felt a part of him that had been dormant for years begin to awaken. Anna's presence filled him with a mixture of hope and curiosity. Something told him that this reunion was no coincidence. As Lucas and Anna chatted, their soft laughter and nostalgic murmurs seemed to fill the space between them. However, a strange feeling was coming over Lucas. Ever since he sat down, he had noticed the presence of a young man at the next table. Although he seemed focused on his phone, their gazes met from time to time, as if he was more interested in their conversation than in what was in front of him. Lucas couldn't help but notice the details. There was something familiar about the young man, with dark hair and intense eyes. There was an inexplicable connection in his countenance that puzzled him. As Anna talked about the changes in the city, Lucas turned his attention to the young man once again, wondering who he was. Finally, Anna seemed to notice Lucas's interest, and with a slight smile, turned her head towards the boy. "Oh, how careless of me," she said, laughing a little. "Lucas, meet Miguel, my son." Lucas's heart skipped a beat. Miguel looked up and nodded politely to Lucas. Lucas tried to hide his surprise, but he couldn't ignore the sudden uneasiness that was taking over him. He made an effort to keep the conversation going, but his mind was elsewhere, examining every feature of Miguel's face. "Nice to meet you, Miguel," he finally said, extending his hand. Miguel shook his hand firmly, though his expression remained inscrutable. There was something in his attitude, a mixture of curiosity and caution, that made Lucas feel as if he were under scrutiny. Anna, noticing the slight change in the atmosphere, tried to ease the tension. "Miguel is studying at the local university," she said proudly. "He is a bright boy, but sometimes a little shy with strangers." "He seems like a nice young man," Lucas replied with a smile that he hoped was reassuring. However, as he watched closely, Lucas couldn't help but feel that there was more to this story. Every time he looked at Miguel, it was as if his mind was trying to fit pieces of a puzzle together. Why did he look so familiar? Was it just a coincidence, or was there something deeper that he didn't yet understand? Miguel, for his part, seemed interested in the conversation, although he maintained a certain emotional distance. Lucas noticed that the young man had gestures and expressions that evoked echoes of his own past, as if he were looking at a younger version of himself. This thought disconcerted him even more. The conversation continued in a friendly manner, but Lucas felt the atmosphere growing increasingly thick. Anna talked about her work, about how she had found stability and satisfaction in her life, but she avoided mentioning specific details about Miguel or his father. Lucas tried not to insist, although his curiosity grew with each passing minute. At one point, Miguel got up to order something at the counter, leaving Lucas and Anna alone. Taking the opportunity, Lucas couldn't help but ask a question that had been on his mind. "Is he your only son?" she asked cautiously. Anna nodded, although her smile lost some of its shine. "Yes, Miguel is everything to me," she replied in a tone that seemed to put an end to the subject. Lucas decided not to press further. However, when Miguel returned to the table, something about his presence seemed to cast a shadow over Lucas's thoughts. The similarities were undeniable, and it was becoming harder to ignore them. Although he couldn't explain it, a part of him was beginning to sense a truth that was still hidden beneath the surface. When they finally said goodbye, Lucas couldn't stop looking at Miguel as they walked away. Something inside him knew that this seemingly chance meeting had a much greater meaning than he was prepared to face. The next afternoon, Lucas arrived at the cafe with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He had spent the night mulling over the events of the previous day, especially the encounter with Miguel. Although he still didn't fully understand what he was feeling, he was sure of one thing. He needed to talk to Anna. He had too many questions, but he knew he had to approach them carefully. When he arrived, Anna was already there, sitting at the same table by the window. She seemed calm, although Lucas sensed a certain tension in her posture. Miguel was not with her this time, which gave Lucas a slight relief. He greeted Anna with a smile and sat down in front of her. "I hope I'm not interrupting your afternoon," he said, trying to break the ice. "Not at all, Lucas." "It's good to see you again," Anna replied, with a warmth that seemed genuine. The conversation began lightly, like an echo of the reunion the day before. They talked about the city, about the changes that had occurred over time, and about the people they had both met in their youth. However, Lucas knew that he could not avoid for long the topics that really worried him. "Do you remember those afternoons in the square?" asked Lucas, diverting the conversation back to the past. "We used to stay there for hours, dreaming of the future." Anna smiled, but her gaze was lost for a moment, as if she were reliving those memories. "Yes, they were simpler times, weren't they?" he replied with a melancholy tone. Lucas took advantage of the pause to advance cautiously. "Have you ever imagined what things would be like if they had been different?" he asked without taking his gaze off Anna. Anna looked at him for a moment, as if considering whether she should answer honestly. Finally, she sighed and placed her hands on the table. "Lucas, life takes us down paths that sometimes we cannot control. I did what I thought was best at the time," she said, choosing her words carefully. That answer, though vague, was enough for Lucas to understand that there was something more behind her words. He decided not to press too hard, at least for now. He changed the subject, directing the conversation towards Miguel. "He seems like a nice kid," she said, trying to sound casual. "He has a mature attitude for his age." Anna nodded, but didn't say much more. There was a barrier in her answers, a line she didn't seem to want to cross. Lucas, however, couldn't ignore the questions that were bubbling in his mind. "And your father?" he finally asked in a softer tone. Anna tensed slightly but kept her composure. "It's not something I talk about much, Lucas. I hope you understand," she replied, looking away toward the window. Anna's reaction confirmed Lucas's suspicions that there was a part of the story she was not willing to share. He decided to change the focus, talking about his own life and the decisions that led him to leave the city. As he did so, he noticed that Anna was listening to him attentively, but also with some reservations. The conversation continued in a superficial manner, but Lucas could feel the unspoken emotions floating in the air. There was a weight in every word, in every pause. Miguel had briefly mentioned the day before that he wanted to study something related to history, and Lucas took the opportunity to praise that interest. Although Anna responded with short comments, as if she wanted to protect her son from any outside curiosity. Time passed quickly, and when Lucas finally said goodbye, he couldn't help but feel like he had taken a step, even if it was small, towards discovering what was really going on. As he walked away from the cafe, he noticed Miguel sitting on a nearby bench, watching him with an inquisitive look. Lucas looked back at him, feeling that the young man represented a door to a past he still didn't fully understand. The next few days passed as a mix of routine and sleeplessness for Lucas. His thoughts revolved around Anna and Miguel, especially the uncomfortable similarities he had noticed between himself and the young man. Determined to clear his doubts, He began to look for opportunities to interact with Miguel, although he did not know exactly what he expected to find. One afternoon, as Lucas was strolling through the main square, he saw him. Miguel was sitting on a bench, absorbed in a book. Lucas felt a mixture of curiosity and nervousness, but he gathered the courage to approach him. "Hello, Miguel," he said with a friendly smile. Miguel looked up, visibly surprised but nodded in greeting. "Hi, Lucas. What are you doing here?" "Just taking a walk," Lucas replied, sitting at a respectful distance. "I saw you were reading. What book is it?" Miguel showed the cover without saying much. It was a book about contemporary history. Lucas couldn't help but smile. Miguel's interest in history reminded him of his own younger years, when he searched for answers in books. "It's a good topic. I used to read about it when I was your age too," Lucas commented, searching for a connection. "Yes?" Miguel asked, raising an eyebrow slightly. "And what interested you the most?" The conversation flowed with surprising ease. They talked about historical figures, about crucial events, and Lucas noticed that Miguel had a sharp mind and a genuine curiosity. Yet beneath that seemingly casual interaction, Lucas felt that they were both sizing each other up. Every gesture, every word seemed to carry extra weight. As they talked, Lucas allowed himself to study Miguel more closely. There was something about the way he spoke, the way he tilted his head slightly as he listened, that was eerily familiar. A pang of excitement crossed his chest as he realized that these little quirks were a reflection of himself. Time passed quickly, and when the conversation began to run out, Miguel closed the book and stood up. "It was interesting talking to you, Lucas. See you around," he said before walking away. Lucas watched him as he walked away, feeling the pieces of a puzzle begin to fit together, although the most important ones were still missing. There was something about Miguel that connected him irrevocably to his own past, and although he had no concrete proof, intuition began to take center stage in his thoughts. That night, as he walked through the streets of his hometown, Lucas found himself reflecting on the decisions that had brought him to this point. He thought of Anna, of the moment when they decided to go their separate ways. It had been a painful but necessary choice, or at least that's what he believed at the time. Now, faced with these new circumstances, he began to question whether it had really been the best decision. The similarities were too many to ignore. Miguel not only shared some of his traits, but also a passion for subjects that Lucas had considered important in his own youth. Every encounter with him filled him with a mixture of admiration and a strange sense of loss. Over the next few days, Lucas made a conscious effort to keep a low profile, limiting his interactions with Anna and Miguel. He felt like he needed time to process everything, to gather his thoughts before taking any further steps. However, the idea that Miguel might be more than just an acquaintance of Anna's kept haunting him. One day, as he was passing by the cafe, he saw Anna sitting alone. He nodded at her but did not go in. From a distance, Lucas could see something in her expression that he had not noticed before. A mixture of nostalgia and something else. Something he could not decipher, but that deeply disturbed him. Every coincidence, every detail, seemed to point to a truth that was closer than Lucas was willing to accept. And although he had not yet directly confronted Anna, he knew that moment was inevitably approaching. Lucas arrived at the cafe with a heavy heart. He had spent days trying to avoid confrontation, but coincidences and doubts were consuming him. Anna had invited him to have coffee that afternoon, and although her tone was casual, Lucas felt that this conversation was going to change everything. He walked slowly, mentally reviewing the questions he had accumulated, but not knowing how to express them without causing pain. When he entered, Anna was already there, at the usual table by the window. She greeted him with a warm smile, but Lucas noticed a certain stiffness in her expression, as if she too knew that the conversation they were about to have would not be easy. "Thanks for coming," Anna said as Lucas sat down. "I wanted to talk to you, clear up a few things." Lucas stared at her, his hands clenched on the table. There was so much he wanted to say, but the words kept getting stuck in his throat. Anna seemed to hesitate for a moment, playing with the coffee cup in her hands before finally finding the courage to speak. "Lucas, I've been thinking a lot these past few days," she began, "about our past, about what you meant to me, and about the decisions I made back then." Her voice was slow, as if she were carefully choosing each word. Lucas didn't interrupt her, though his chest tightened with each passing second. "There's something you need to know. Something I should have told you years ago," Anna continued, avoiding her gaze for a moment before gathering the courage to face her. "Miguel, he's your son." The world seemed to stop for Lucas. The words echoed in his mind, bouncing around like an endless echo. For a moment he couldn't respond. His mind was trying to process the truth, but his heart had already accepted it before Anna said it. "My son?" she finally asked, her voice barely a whisper. Anna nodded, tears gathering in her eyes. "It wasn't easy, Lucas. When you decided to leave, I thought it was the best thing for both of us. I didn't want you to feel tied down, to sacrifice your dreams for something we hadn't planned. I thought I was doing the right thing by keeping it a secret." Lucas put a hand to his face, trying to contain the emotions that were flooding through him. He felt a mix of disbelief, pain, and guilt. He thought of the years he had lost, of the opportunities to meet his son, to be a part of his life. "Why didn't you tell me before?" he asked, this time more firmly, although his tone was not reproachful, but anguished. Anna sighed, letting a tear escape. "Because I was afraid, Lucas. Afraid of what you would think. Afraid that you wouldn't want to take on that responsibility. And then years went by, and I just didn't know how to do it." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with unspoken emotions. Lucas stared out the window, trying to find a fixed point that would allow him to gather his thoughts. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with determination. "I need to get to know him better, Anna. I need to make up for lost time, even though I know it will never be enough." Anna watched him with a mixture of relief and sadness. "Miguel doesn't know anything, Lucas. I've tried to protect him, but I know I can't hide the truth from him forever." Lucas nodded slowly, knowing that the road ahead of him would not be easy. However, a spark of hope began to form inside him. For the first time, he had a chance to correct something he thought was lost forever. The conversation ended with a few more words. As they said goodbye, Lucas felt that an immense weight had fallen on him, but also that he had taken the first step towards a new reality. Now all that remained was to face Miguel and find a way to build something from the pieces of the past. That night, Lucas couldn't sleep. Anna's words echoed in his mind, and the weight of the truth seemed more intense with each passing minute. Miguel was his son. The revelation had been like an emotional earthquake, shaking the foundations of everything he thought he knew about his life. Despite the confusion, he knew there was only one possible direction. He had to approach Miguel, even if he didn't know how he would be received. The next morning, Lucas decided he couldn't put off facing reality any longer. He walked to the main square, where he knew he would probably find Miguel. Just as he had imagined, the young man was there, sitting on the same bench, this time checking something on his laptop. Lucas took a deep breath before approaching. "Good morning, Miguel," she said, trying hard to sound natural. Miguel looked up, surprised but not upset. He closed his laptop and gestured for her to sit down. "Hi, Lucas. You seem to always be around here," she said, her tone seeming to be a mix of curiosity and caution. "It's a quiet place. It reminds me of many things," Lucas replied as he sat down next to him. There was a moment of awkward silence. Lucas knew he couldn't just jump to the truth, but he also understood that he had to start building a bridge. He decided to speak from the heart. "Miguel, I've been thinking about you a lot since we met," he finally said. "You have a way of being that seems familiar to me." Miguel frowned slightly as if trying to decipher Lucas's words. "What do you mean?" he asked with a slight tone of distrust. Lucas swallowed. The fear of rejection was immense, but he knew he had to try. "I want to get to know you better, learn more about you, your dreams, your interests. I don't want to seem nosy, but I feel it's important." Miguel watched him in silence for a few seconds before answering. "It's a little strange, to be honest. We barely know each other, but you seem interested in me in a way I don't quite understand." The sincerity in Miguel's words hit Lucas like a bucket of cold water. It was obvious that the young man was taken aback, but Lucas could also sense that there was an opening, a small window to establish a connection. "I understand," Lucas admitted, leaning forward slightly. "And you're right, it is weird. But there's something I want you to know. If you ever need someone to talk to, someone to listen to you, I'm here for you." Miguel seemed to process those words, although his expression remained reserved. "Thanks, I guess," he replied, though his tone suggested he still wasn't sure what to think. Lucas decided not to push any further. He knew that the relationship he sought to build with Miguel could not be forced, especially considering the truth that had not yet come to light. However, he could not ignore the feeling that Miguel was beginning to suspect something. The following days were marked by brief but meaningful interactions. Lucas made an effort to be constant, to be present without being invasive. Miguel, although at first distant, began to open up little by little. He shared anecdotes about the university, his projects, and some of his personal interests. However, there were times when Lucas could sense a barrier, a resistance that he still could not overcome. For his part, Miguel was also struggling with his own thoughts. There was something about Lucas that raised uncomfortable questions, a feeling he couldn't ignore. The similarities between them were obvious, and although he didn't want to admit it, he was beginning to wonder if there was more to Lucas's presence in their lives. One afternoon, while walking through the square after a quick coffee, Miguel suddenly stopped and looked at Lucas seriously. "Why are you here, Lucas?" "Really?" she asked, her voice firm but not aggressive. Lucas felt his chest tighten at the question. It was the moment he had been dreading, but he also knew he couldn't avoid the truth any longer. "I'm here because I think we have a lot more in common than you might think," he replied, choosing his words carefully. Miguel stared at him, as if seeking confirmation of something on his face. Finally, he nodded, but said nothing more. They both continued walking in silence, aware that something was changing between them, although there was still a long way to go. The next few days were marked by a strange balance between closeness and tension. Lucas knew he had to take small steps to gain Miguel's trust, but every interaction seemed fraught with unspoken questions and pent-up emotions. Despite this, he decided to give it a try. One afternoon, he invited Miguel to go for a walk in the park. Although the young man was hesitant at first, he eventually agreed. As they walked under the shade of the trees, Lucas began to share stories from his youth. "When I was your age, I liked coming to this park," Lucas said, pointing to a bench near a pond. "I would spend hours here, dreaming about the future and thinking about all the things I wanted to achieve." Miguel glanced at him, apparently interested, although he maintained his usual reserved air. "And did you fulfill those dreams?" Miguel asked, with a mixture of curiosity and sarcasm. Lucas smiled, recognizing the defiant tone in the question. "Some do, some don't. Life has funny ways of taking you down paths you didn't expect." The answer seemed to resonate with Miguel, who remained silent for a few moments. Lucas took advantage of the pause to continue. "It's funny how sometimes the decisions we make seem right at the time, but then you realize that something got lost along the way." "What's wrong? This seems serious," he said, frowning. Anna and Lucas exchanged a look before Anna began to speak. "Miguel, there's something we need to tell you, something we've been keeping to ourselves for a long time. Too long." Miguel tilted his head slightly as if trying to guess what was coming. However, the seriousness on both of their faces made him remain silent. "Lucas isn't here by chance," Anna continued, her voice shaking slightly. "There's something you need to know about him and about yourself." Miguel looked back and forth between the two of them. A mixture of confusion and apprehension reflected on his face. "What are you talking about?" he asked, crossing his arms in a defensive gesture. Lucas took a deep breath before speaking. "Miguel, I am your father." The silence that followed was deafening. Miguel stared at them as if he was processing the information, but his face soon turned into an expression of disbelief and rage. "What are you saying?" he asked, getting up from his chair. "This doesn't make sense. Why didn't anyone ever tell me anything?" Anna rushed to try to calm him down. "I wanted to protect you, Miguel. I thought it was the best thing to do at the time, but I understand that I was wrong not to tell you before." Miguel took a step back, his hands on his head. His emotions seemed to be clashing with each other, and Lucas could see the internal struggle in his eyes. "What now? Do you expect me to just accept everything as if nothing happened?" he said, his voice thick with resentment. "We don't expect you to understand everything right away," Lucas replied calmly. "But I'm here, and I want to make up for lost time, if you'll allow me." Miguel looked at them for a few more seconds before shaking his head. "I don't know if I can do this," he said, before turning and hurriedly leaving the cafe. Anna watched him go, tears running down her cheeks. "We gave him the truth, Anna. Now we can only wait," Lucas said, although uncertainty consumed him inside. Several days passed without any news from Miguel. Lucas and Anna respected his space, giving him time to process the revelation, although the wait was agony. Lucas spent the nights remembering moments he never experienced, imagining what it would have been like to be present in his son's life from the beginning. Anna, for her part, struggled with the guilt of having hidden the truth for so long. One afternoon, as Lucas was walking through the main square, he spotted Miguel sitting on a bench, staring at the horizon. He took a deep breath, gathered the necessary courage, and approached with cautious steps. "Can I sit down?" she asked, pointing to the empty space next to Miguel. Miguel glanced at him, his expression serious, but he nodded. Lucas sat in silence, not knowing exactly how to begin. Finally, it was Miguel who broke the ice. "These have been complicated days," he said without taking his eyes off the horizon. Lucas nodded, understanding the weight of those words. "I understand, and I want you to know that I don't expect everything to be resolved overnight. I just want you to know that I'm here for you, whatever you need." Miguel was silent for a moment, as if he were weighing those words. Then he turned his head toward Lucas. "It's strange, you know. All my life I thought I knew my story, that I knew who I was. And now, it's like everything has changed all of a sudden." "I know," Lucas replied, his voice soft. "And I'm sorry I wasn't there to help you build that story. I can't change the past, but I want to be part of your future, if you'll let me." Miguel looked down, playing with a rock he had picked up from the ground. His voice was softer when he spoke again. "I don't know how to fit all this in, Lucas, but I guess there's no point in pushing you away any longer. If you really want to be here, I guess we can try." Lucas's heart filled with hope at those words. He knew the road would be long, and there were still many barriers to overcome, but that small gesture of openness was all he needed. "Thank you, Miguel. It means a lot to me," she said, smiling sincerely. The days that followed were marked by small steps towards reconciliation. Lucas and Miguel began to spend more time together, sharing stories and moments that helped strengthen the bond between them. Miguel was still reserved in certain aspects, but little by little he seemed to accept Lucas's presence in his life. For her part, Anna observed the changes with a mixture of relief and melancholy. Although she knew she had made mistakes, seeing Lucas and Miguel connect gave her the feeling that the wounds of the past were beginning to heal. Light, but charged with a new dynamic of trust and acceptance. Miguel, though still processing everything, seemed more comfortable with Lucas's presence. As the meeting came to an end, Miguel looked at his mother and Lucas with a serious but calm expression. "I don't promise it will be easy," he said, "but I want to try." Lucas nodded, feeling that for the first time, they were on the right track. "That's all I ask," he replied with a smile that reflected his gratitude. As they walked out of the cafe, Lucas felt that despite the mistakes of the past, he had found a new opportunity. Miguel walked beside him, and although there was still distance between them, the simple fact of being together was a symbol of hope. The relationship between Lucas, Anna, and Miguel would not be perfect, but they were willing to work on it, step by step. And in that moment, under the afternoon sun, they all shared something they had not experienced for a long time: the possibility of a new beginning. Luke's story teaches us that it is never too late to face the past and seek redemption. Sometimes the decisions we make at the time may seem right, but time shows us the opportunities we missed. What about you? How would you have handled this situation? Would you dare to rebuild a lost relationship, or would you rather leave the past where it is? Reflect on it. Click on the video on screen to continue this exciting journey of self-discovery and explore stories that inspire us to grow. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this one. Thanks for joining us, and see you in the next video.